I never thought I'd be the type of person to get revenge on family. But after what my cousin did to me, I realized sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is to give them exactly what they're asking for. Let me explain how this all started, because the scam was so perfectly executed that I didn't even realize I was being played until it was way too late. My cousin Derek and I grew up close. We were only 2 years apart, spent every holiday together, and our parents always joked that we were more like brothers than cousins. Derek was always the charming one, the guy who could talk his way into or out of anything. I was the quieter one, the person who worked hard, saved money, and generally tried to do the right thing. Our dynamic worked for years until money got involved, and that's when everything changed. About 3 years ago, Derek called me out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken much in the previous year because life got busy, but hearing his voice felt like old times. He sounded excited, energetic, like he had just discovered the secret to life itself. He told me he had started a business, a consulting company that helped small businesses optimize their online presence. He said it was taking off, that clients were lining up, and that he was making more money than he ever thought possible. I was genuinely happy for him. Derek had always been a bit of a dreamer, jumping from idea to idea. So hearing that something was finally working out felt like a win for our whole family. Then came the pitch. He told me he was looking to expand, to bring on a partner who could handle the financial side of things, while he focused on client relations and marketing. He said he immediately thought of me because I had always been good with numbers, and because he trusted me more than anyone else. He made it sound like an opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to build something real together, something that could set both of us up for the future. He even threw in the family angle, talking about how cool it would be to work together, to create something our kids could be proud of one day. I was intrigued but cautious. I asked him for details, for proof that the business was as successful as he claimed. Derek sent me screenshots of invoices, bank statements showing healthy deposits, and even testimonials from supposed clients. Everything looked legitimate. The numbers added up. He had contracts, recurring revenue, and what appeared to be a solid foundation, he said. He needed $50,000 to scale up, to hire additional staff, invest in better software, and expand marketing efforts. He promised that within a year, I'd double my investment, and we'd both be sitting pretty. $50,000 was not a small amount for me. It represented years of saving, of living below my means, of skipping vacations and driving an old car so I could build something stable for my future. But Derek made it sound so foolproof, so ready to explode into something massive that I started to believe him. He also offered to draw up a contract, to make everything official and legal. That gave me confidence. If he was willing to put it in writing, it had to be real. I talked to my wife about it. She was skeptical from the beginning. She liked Derek well enough, but she reminded me that he had a history of big ideas that fizzled out. She told me to be careful, to maybe invest a smaller amount first, to test the waters before diving in completely. But I was caught up in the excitement of it all, in the idea of being part of something successful, of working with family and building wealth together. I convinced her that this was different, that Derek had finally found his thing, and that we'd regret it if we didn't take the chance. So I transferred the money, $50,000 wired directly into the business account Derek had set up. He was ecstatic, thanking me over and over, promising that I had just made the best decision of my life. He sent me the signed contract, told me we'd start having monthly meetings to review progress, and assured me that I'd see returns within the first quarter. For the first month, everything seemed fine. Derek would send me updates, talk about new clients he was bringing on, and share marketing materials he was creating. I felt good about the investment. Then the updates started to slow down. By the second month, I had to reach out to him to get any information. He'd respond, but his messages were vague, filled with phrases like, "Things are moving along," and "just working through some minor setbacks." I asked for financial reports, for proof of the progress he kept mentioning. He'd send me bits and pieces, but nothing comprehensive, nothing that actually showed where my money was going, or what kind of return I could expect. By the third month, Derek stopped responding altogether. I'd call, and he wouldn't pick up. I'd text, and he'd reply hours or even days later with excuses about being busy with clients or dealing with unexpected issues. I started to feel a knot forming in my stomach, a creeping realization that something was very wrong. I asked other family members if they had heard from him. Some had, but they said he seemed stressed, that he mentioned the business was going through growing pains. Why? No one seemed overly concerned, which made me feel like maybe I was overreacting. But I wasn't overreacting. I decided to do some digging on my own. I looked up the business name. Derek had registered, searched for the website he claimed was bringing in all these clients. The website existed, but it looked hastily put together, like a template someone had filled out in an afternoon. There were no real case studies, no client testimonials that I could verify, and no evidence of the thriving operation Derek had sold me on. I reached out to a few of the businesses listed as clients on the site. None of them had ever heard of Derek or his company. That's when it hit me. I had been scammed, not by some stranger on the internet, not by some faceless criminal, but by my own cousin. The cousin I grew up with, the guy I trusted more than most people in the world. The $50,000 I had given him hadn't gone into a business. It had gone into his pockets, probably funding a lifestyle he couldn't afford or paying off debts he had racked up. The invoices, the bank statements, the glowing testimonials, all of it had been fabricated. He had played me perfectly, using our history, our family connection, and my own desire to believe in him as tools to pull off the con. I was furious. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and stupid for not seeing it coming. My wife didn't say "I told you so," but I could see it in her eyes. She was disappointed, not just in Derek, but in me for ignoring her warnings. I wanted to confront him, to demand my money back, to expose him to the entire family for what he had done. But every time I tried to reach him, he'd dodge me, offering weak excuses or promising to explain everything soon. It became clear that he had no intention of paying me back or even acknowledging what he had done. I considered legal action. I had the contract, the wire transfer records, and proof that the business he described didn't actually exist. But lawyers cost money, and there was no guarantee I'd ever see a dime of my investment returned, even if I won. Derek didn't have assets I could go after. He rented his apartment, drove a leased car, and had probably already spent most of the money. Taking him to court would have been throwing good money after bad, and it would have torn the family apart in the process. So I sat with my anger for a while, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to hurt him or ruin his life. But I also couldn't just let it go, couldn't pretend that losing $50,000 to a family member's con was something I could move past without any kind of resolution. That's when the idea started to form. If Derek had scammed me by pretending to have a business, maybe I could scam him back by actually creating one. Here's what I did. I spent the next 6 months quietly building a legitimate online consulting business. I used the skills I already had, the network I had developed over the years, and every spare hour I could find to create something real. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to build something that looked successful enough to get Derek's attention. I created a professional website, landed a few small clients, and made sure everything was documented and verifiable. I worked my tail off, not because I loved consulting, but because I needed Derek to believe that I had moved on, that I had found my own path to success, and that I was doing better than ever. Once I had a foundation in place, I started casually mentioning my business to family members. I'd talk about clients I was working with, projects I was managing, and how surprised I was at how quickly things were growing. I made sure the information would eventually get back to Derek, and sure enough, it did. About 8 months after he had ghosted me, Derek reached out. He sent me a text like nothing had ever happened, asking how I was doing and saying he had heard I was doing well with my own business. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the $50,000 he still owed me, just a casual reconnection as if we were still the close cousins we used to be. I played it cool. I responded casually, told him things were going great, and even thanked him for inspiring me to take the leap into entrepreneurship. I could tell he was fishing for information, trying to figure out if I was actually making money or just putting on a show, so I fed him just enough details to make it believable. I mentioned a big contract I had just landed, talked about how I was thinking of hiring help, and even joked about how crazy it was that we were both running our own businesses now. Derek took the bait. Within a week he called me, and this time he was the one with the pitch. He told me he had been watching what I was doing, that he was impressed, and that he thought we should work together. He said his business had gone through some rough patches, which was why he had been out of touch, but that he was back on track and ready to grow again. He suggested we combine our efforts, pool our resources, and build something even bigger together. He even had the nerve to say that we'd both benefit from partnership, that two heads were better than one. I let him talk. I asked questions, acted interested, and made it seem like I was seriously considering his proposal. Then I told him I'd think about it, that I needed to review my current commitments before taking on a partner. He was persistent, calling me every few days, sending me ideas, and really selling the vision of what we could build together. He never once mentioned the money he owed me. It was like it had never happened. After a few weeks of this, I agreed to meet with him in person to discuss the partnership. We met at a coffee shop, and Derek showed up with a folder full of papers, charts, and projections. He had clearly put effort into this pitch, which told me he was desperate. He needed whatever I had going on because his own situation was probably falling apart. He talked for nearly an hour, laying out his vision, explaining how we'd split responsibilities, and painting a picture of future success. When he finally stopped talking, I leaned back in my chair and asked him one simple question. "Do you remember the $50,000 I gave you?" His face changed instantly. The confidence drained away, replaced by something between guilt and defensiveness. He stammered, said he was going to bring that up, that he had been meaning to talk to me about it. He gave me a story about how the business had hit unexpected obstacles, how he had tried to make it work, and how he felt terrible about how things had turned out. He promised he'd pay me back eventually, once he got back on his feet. I nodded, let him finish, and then I told him the truth. I told him that I knew he had scammed me, that there had never been a real business, and that he had used our family connection to steal from me. I told him that I had spent months being angry, feeling betrayed, and trying to figure out how to move forward. And then I told him about my business, the real one I had built, and how it had taught me something important. I had learned that success doesn't come from taking shortcuts or conning people you care about. It comes from actual work, from building something real, and from treating people with respect. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear. He tried to defend himself, to explain, to minimize what he had done, but I cut him off. I told him I wasn't interested in excuses or apologies. Instead, I had a proposal for him. I told him that if he really wanted to partner with me, if he genuinely wanted to be part of something successful, he could start by working for my business. Not as a partner, not as an equal, but as an entry-level consultant. He'd earn a small salary, learn the business from the ground up, and prove that he was capable of actually contributing something valuable. Here's the kicker. I told him that every paycheck he earned would be split. Half would go to him for living expenses, and the other half would go toward paying back the $50,000 he owed me. I did the math in front of him. At the rate I was offering, it would take him years to pay me back, but he'd eventually clear the debt if he stuck with it. I made it clear that this wasn't a negotiation. If he wanted any kind of relationship with me moving forward, if he wanted to be part of the family without the weight of what he had done hanging over him, this was the only path forward. Derek didn't know what to say. He clearly hadn't expected this. He had come to the meeting thinking he could charm his way into another opportunity, maybe even scam me again. Instead, he was faced with a choice. He could walk away, accept that he had burned the bridge completely, and live with the fact that everyone in the family would eventually know what he had done. Or he could take the deal, put in the work, and slowly rebuild both his finances and his reputation. He took the deal. I don't think it was because he suddenly grew a conscience or felt genuine remorse. I think he realized he was out of options. His own ventures had failed, he had no money, and he needed something stable. Working for me was humiliating for him. I could see that, but it was also his only real choice. For the first few months, Derek did the bare minimum. He'd show up, do the tasks I assigned, and collect his paycheck. But he wasn't putting in real effort. and it showed. I didn't coddle him or make it easy. I gave him the same expectations I'd have for any employee, and when he didn't meet them, I called him out. There were moments when I thought he might quit, when the frustration of working for someone he had scammed became too much for his ego to handle. But he didn't quit. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was necessity, but he stuck with it. Slowly, something started to change. Derek began to actually learn the business. He started asking better questions, taking initiative on projects, and even bringing in ideas that were genuinely useful. I don't know if it was because he finally realized that shortcuts don't work, or if he just got tired of being mediocre, but he started to become a real contributor. Clients liked working with him. His charm, the same quality he had used to con me, turned out to be an asset when applied to legitimate work. After about a year, Derek had paid back around $15,000. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. More importantly, our relationship started to shift. We weren't close like we used to be. That trust had been shattered, and I don't know if it'll ever fully come back. But we could work together, have conversations, and even occasionally laugh about things that weren't related to the mess he had created. The scam I pulled on Derek wasn't about taking something from him. It was about giving him exactly what he had asked for. A partnership, but on terms that held him accountable. He wanted to work with me, to be part of something successful, and I gave him that opportunity. But I also made sure that he couldn't just walk away from what he had done, that there were real consequences, and that rebuilding required actual effort. Did I get my full $50,000 back? Not yet. As of now, Derek has paid back a little over $28,000, and he's still working for the business. At the current rate, he'll have the debt cleared in another year and a half. Some people have told me I should have just cut my losses, that holding him to this arrangement is too harsh, that family should forgive and move on. But I don't see it that way. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing consequences. It doesn't mean pretending that betrayal didn't happen or that stolen money doesn't matter. What Derek did to me was wrong, and it hurt in ways that went beyond the financial loss. It damaged my trust, not just in him, but in my own judgment. It made me question how well I really knew the people in my life. But forcing him to work off the debt, too, proved that he could actually build something through honest effort, that gave me something back. Not just money, but a sense that justice doesn't always have to come from a courtroom or public humiliation. Sometimes it comes from creating a situation where the person who wronged you has to face what they did every single day and choose whether to make it right or walk away. Derek chose to stay. He's not a partner in my business, and he probably never will be. But he's a functioning member of the team, someone who contributes value, and someone who is slowly learning what it means to earn trust instead of exploiting it. The rest of the family eventually found out what had happened. I didn't tell them, but Derek did. I think carrying the secret became too heavy, and he needed to admit what he had done. There was fallout, disappointment, and some strained relationships, but no one cut him off completely. Our family isn't perfect, but we try to give people chances to make things right. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled it. I could have sued him, exposed him publicly, or just walked away and written off the money as a painful lesson. But none of those options would have given me what I actually wanted, which was accountability, effort, and some kind of resolution that didn't destroy everyone involved. The scam I pulled on Derek wasn't revenge, it was a mirror. I gave him the opportunity he said he wanted, but I structured it in a way that forced him to confront what he had done and work toward making it right. Some people ask me if I think Derek has really changed, if he's genuinely sorry, or if he's just going through the motions because he has no other choice. Honestly, I don't know. I'd like to believe that working honestly, seeing the results of real effort, and experiencing what it's like to build something legitimate has shifted his perspective. But I also know that people are complicated, that change is hard, and that some lessons take longer to sink in than others. What I do know is that I changed through this experience. I learned that being the good guy, the one who trusts people and gives them the benefit of the doubt, doesn't mean I have to be a doormat. I can hold people accountable without being cruel. I can demand consequences without seeking destruction, and I can protect myself while still leaving room for redemption if someone is willing to put in the work. The business I built out of this mess is still running. It's not huge, but it's stable, profitable, and something I'm proud of. Derek is still part of it, still paying back what he owes, and still showing up every day. Whether he'll stick around after the debt is cleared, I don't know. Maybe he'll move on, start his own thing again, and apply what he's learned. Maybe he'll fall back into old patterns. That's not something I can control. What I can control is how I respond to betrayal, how I structure my boundaries, and what kind of example I set for how to handle conflict within a family. I didn't let Derek off the hook, but I also didn't destroy him. I gave him a path forward, one that required real work and real accountability, and he took it. That's more than I expected when this whole thing started. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's that revenge doesn't have to be about causing pain. Sometimes the best way to make someone face what they've done is to give them exactly what they asked for, but with terms they didn't anticipate. Derek wanted a partnership. I gave him one. He just didn't realize that partnership would require him to rebuild everything he had destroyed, one paycheck at a time. And honestly, watching him do that, seeing him struggle, grow, and slowly become someone who contributes instead of takes, that's been more satisfying than any legal victory or public shaming ever could have been. It's not a perfect ending. It's messy, complicated, and still unfolding, but it's real, and it's mine, and that's enough. So yeah, that's how a family member scammed me, and how I scammed them back in a way that wasn't harmful, but was definitely justice. Not the kind of justice you see in movies, but the kind that actually requires patience, boundaries, and a willingness to let someone prove they can do better. Whether Derek ultimately does, that's still being written, but at least now he has the chance. And I have my money slowly coming back, along with a business I built and a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life.